Okay, we're in Unit 2, Lesson 2. Um, we talked about positive and negative shape last time, and so now we're going to be talking about creating depth. Lesson 2, Creating Depth. Lesson 2 introduces how artists create depth by size and placement of objects in artwork.
Suppose you were looking out your bedroom window. Why do even large size objects in the distance all fit within the window frame?
Vamos a suponer que se asoman por la ventana de su habitación, porque hasta los objetos grandes en la distancia caben dentro del marco de la ventana.
So today you're going to learn how to artists create depth by the size and the placement of objects in the artwork. You're going to be able to evaluate your own work using the 4 steps of art criticism at the very end. And if you'd like, you can plan or create a real and imaginary scene with a foreground, a background that will illustrate depth. And you're also going to look and discuss artwork called Washington's Headquarters, 1780. So let's start. You're going to look at the 2 artworks on these pages. Both artists show depth by making the objects in the foreground larger and the objects in the background smaller.
Let's take a look at the 2 works of art.
What time in American history does the painting Washington's Headquarters tell us about? Let's look at the title. Artist unknown, Washington Headquarters, 1780. If you don't know off the top of your head, you might want to look that up. We're going to look at it in a few minutes. Design awareness. Look at what looks smaller in the pictures. The objects closer to you or the objects further away. I'm going to study both paintings to see how the artist created depth by making the objects seem near or far away. Okay, so first of all, let's look at this one right here. I'm going to zoom in on it. And Washington's Headquarters, 1780, was created in the late 1800s, a time when Americans began to place greater importance on the arts and develop strong interest in realism, meaning paintings that look real. Okay, they didn't have cameras back then, so anytime they created artwork, it was the function was to be used like a camera. So portraits were taken, just like we would when we go to take pictures. And for certain events, there was an artist who would illustrate certain events so they could put those in newspapers and magazines and write about it in books so people could read about it. So they had to be very careful that they included all the details and didn't leave anything out, because we know that pictures tell a story. And back then, there were a lot of people who were illiterate and who could not read. So it's very important for artwork back then to be accurate, especially if it was about telling a story. So Washington's Headquarters, 1780, was inspired by the United States Centennial, which was celebrated in 1876. The year that artwork was completed, okay? The theme was patriotism. Washington's Headquarters, 1780, is a mixed media collage, which means it was mixed media means there's a lot of different things that they used. Paint, cutouts, all kinds of different things combined together and pasted down in some kind of composition. So it's a collage. When you see the word collage, you know it's something that is like cutouts of things that are pasted, okay? And this one is by an artist named William Turner. Joseph William Turner, born in London, England, and at 13, he was making drawings at home and exhibiting them in his father's shop window for sale. By the time that he was 18, he had his own art studio where people were eager to buy his paintings. Venice was the inspiration of many of his paintings, wherever he visited, he studied the effects of the sea and the sky in every kind of weather. He was regarded as one of the founders of English watercolor and landscape painting. So let's check this one out. And this one says, find the objects that seem to be closest. Well, we already know, let me zoom in, that anytime that we place anything at the very bottom of the page, that means it's supposed to be closest to us. So therefore, you see the people are larger right here. And then, so it's like the foreground is the stuff that's up close. The middle ground is the stuff that's in the middle. Oh, look at how they use this right here. See how there's a line of soldiers and they get bigger and then they get smaller. And anytime that you create something large and you make it go converge going into the background, if you look at the flag is like a dot on the paper, and they use these lines to guide them. And so it goes from larger to smaller. And then, of course, you can see ships. Ships are way bigger than people, but they wanted to show that this was in the background. So they made them smaller. And anything that you put in the background should always be smaller and higher up on the page to make it seem like it's further away. Notice that the mountains back here are back here, and it doesn't really have a whole lot of details, but there's not a lot of details in the things that are in the background. And as you move forward, there's not that much detail, and there's a little bit more, and then you'll see lots of details up front. Okay, so you can see that this is the water and the ship, and makes me, I'm wondering, it doesn't say, it just says, I'm wondering if this was like, if these weren't like pieces of wood that they used and glued some things onto like a canvas and wood and stuff like that, because it kind of looks like wood, but it's really cool. You see ships. I was wondering why they didn't paint it blue, but I'm thinking if it was made out of wood, then they wouldn't have painted it. But you do see ships on here and boats and the American flag. And you could tell that it's from a long time ago because this flag has like circles on it. And you can also tell by the outfits. And we don't ride horses anymore. So, and there's cannons. And remember, if you know anything, back in the day, they used to fight and they would stand in rows like that. Let's see here. And then you can see the British flag. And things are very, very small. It's headquarters. Awesome. So, foreground, Mortlake Terrace. So in this one right here, let's look at this one. You notice that the things that are bigger, there's like the wall right here, and then the big tree. And as it goes further, it gets smaller. And the way back in the background is really, really tiny. And the boats, you can't even see their little dots. But then as you get lower to the paper, things get bigger and you can see a little bit more of the details. Cool. So which objects seem to be furthest away? We said like the things in the background, the mountains are the furthest away, and the tree line back there, really, really tiny, that small house. What objects can you see most clearly? I told you, like the people in the foreground, the people at the very bottom are the things that you can see the most clearly. Draw a line with your finger between the front and the back of the scenes. And you take your finger and you go from front to, they converge. Converge means going from largest to small, okay? Remember, let's see here. Take your finger, go from the front of the scene all the way to the back. Do the objects in the front and the back look like they are the same size? No, not at all. So let's check it out. Creating depth. Okay, some of you guys are probably wondering, what is she talking about? Depth, the red word, depth in artwork, not death, depth, is created when some object seems to be very close and others seem to be far away. Just like in real life, objects in artwork that are larger seem to be closer, and objects that are smaller seem to be further away. Also, objects in artwork that have clear, sharp edges and lots of details seems to be closer, and the things that are far away are kind of fuzzy and don't have a lot of details. Okay, I like to use this example as back in the day, and during like the Middle Ages and stuff like that, when they didn't know that the Earth was round, they got that idea of looking at ships, and as the ships would, get closer to the horizon and get further and further away, your view would get smaller. Like the boat would be really big, and as it sailed further away, it would get smaller and disappear. Therefore, a lot of people thought that the earth was straight, flat, and that when you couldn't see it anymore, it's because the ship fell off the earth. Yeah, that's before that they knew that the earth was round. Anyway, that's what they say. Okay. So you can understand how understanding depth, when they're looking at something like, for example, here's a tree. The tree's really big up close, but as you go further away, the tree gets smaller, 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 smaller. Okay. Foreground is the part of the picture. Foreground is the front. Front for four. Foreground is the part of the picture that appears closest at the very bottom. That means anything that you put down on the bottom, you should make bigger because it means it's closer to you, okay? It's usually at the bottom of the picture. The background, things that are on the back, are always going to be at the top of the picture, and it's also going to be smaller. It's a part of the picture plan that seems to be the furthest away from the viewer, usually located at the top of the picture.
How can you create a sense of depth?
Using these three things I just told you about. So, if you were to draw a picture for practice, you don't have to do this. Draw objects in the foreground and also in the background. Near the bottom of your paper, draw a large animal or object. And then number 2, draw the same animal or object near the top of your paper. Make it much smaller. So here you can see the girl's drawing a mountain that's big. And then she draws her horizon line, goes from side to side. And then she draws some more mountains, but she makes them smaller. Okay, voila, you've created depth. Think about how how the student, Katie Walters, age 9, showed depth in her artwork. She's a big old walrus on an ice floe. And then you go further in the background, you see that there seems to be some more ice, and I think maybe like a little walrus in the background. But you can't tell what it is, just like you couldn't normally unless you had a telescope. So it doesn't matter. The details don't matter. Big walrus, small in the background, walrus is close to us. Everything in the background is far away. What does your favorite color outdoor place look like? Draw it using a variety of lines. Think about the place that has a lot of animals. Make a sketch if you want to of the animals in your scene. Show depth by using one of the 3 things I talked about earlier. You're going to have to go on your Canvas and do your module for lesson 2. And I'm pretty sure that in the Nearpod lesson, you will be asked to show example of one of the things we just talked about. So anything that you do on here is extra credit for like dojo points, but where you're going to get your grade from each week is going to be on Nearpod. That's something that you're going to have to do. I've only made these recordings for you guys for the kids who have recorded art, so they don't have to actually do the Nearpod. They can watch this and go do the Nearpod later. So here's the example of a person doing this activity where they're making it outdoor. They're creating their animals. As you can see, the horse is the biggest because it's closer in the bottom. Cow's a little smaller. He's in the middle. And then everything else, like the trees and stuff like that, the mountains are really small. They're higher up on the page, and they are smaller. Voila. So you should be able to name the animals and objects in your picture if you created one. You should be able to tell us what you put in your background and what would your title be. Were you able to create a feeling of depth in your artwork or not? You are done with this lesson, and we will be doing lesson 3 next week. Make sure that you go onto your Canvas and to do your lesson, and make sure you answer all the questions and take the quiz at the end and submit it. See you next week.